The puppy returns home after several days of being lost, leaving its owner speechless and moved. Don't forget to subscribe to the Stories of Life's Acts channel. And before we continue this story, let us know where you are from. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe as we release videos every day at 12:30 p.m. Sarah's family lives in a charming little house by the beach in Southern California, where the atmosphere is pleasant and the waves gently crash onto the shore. Sarah is an animal lover, especially dogs. After losing her previous four-legged companion, she decided to adopt a puppy to fill the silence in her home. The puppy she chose was a golden Labrador named Max. From a young age, Max was very lively and intelligent. He quickly became an inseparable part of the family. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a loyal companion, always ready to share both joy and sorrow with Sarah. Every morning, Sarah and Max had a routine. They would go for a walk together at the nearby park. Max loved running and playing happily, while Sarah enjoyed the fresh air and the beauty of nature. The puppy always stayed close to her, sometimes running around joyfully, but never straying too far. In the afternoons, when Sarah worked in the garden, Max often lay on the grass, wagging his tail whenever she paused and looked at him. Max also had a very adorable habit of crawling into Sarah's bed every morning, snuggling up in her arms, and sleeping a little longer before starting the day. They shared many memorable moments, deepening the bond between them and making their love for each other even stronger. Despite being busy with work and life, Sarah always made time to care for Max, feeding him his favorite meals and taking care of his health. Max wasn't just a dog, he was a close friend, an irreplaceable member of their little family. Happiness seemed to fill Sarah's home until one morning when Max suddenly disappeared. Sarah had just gone outside to water the plants, but when she came back, Max was gone. At first, she thought little of it, assuming Max was just running around the garden as usual. But when she called his name and received no response, she began to feel that something was wrong. She ran outside, calling Max's name loudly and searching everywhere in the garden. A sense of fear, one she had never felt before, began to rise within her. Max was usually very obedient and never left without a reason. Sarah's hurried steps and anxious heart grew more tense as she couldn't find the dog anywhere in the garden or around the house. A feeling of loss overwhelmed her, and an intense anxiety began to spread through Sarah's heart. She couldn't understand why Max had left without any sign or clear reason. Although she tried to stay calm, she couldn't help but feel confused. She immediately notified her family and neighbors, and they all joined in the search for Max throughout the day. Everyone participated, but no one could find the dog anywhere. That day, the sun was shining, and the breeze was gentle. Sarah was doing some chores in the garden, just like every day. Max was running around her, happily chasing the leaves blowing in the wind. Sarah occasionally stopped and petted him, smiling as she saw Max jumping and rolling around on the grass. They always had these joyful moments together when she was gardening. But in just a moment of distraction, when Sarah turned back from a flower bush in the garden, Max was no longer there. She thought he had just run off somewhere, like he always did. But when she called his name, there was no response. She thought maybe Max was playing with some birds or a squirrel in the large garden, but after calling out for a long time, he did not come back. Sarah began searching around the garden, calling out Max's name again and again. But there was no sign of him. A sense of worry began to spread in her, and she felt that something was not right. Max never went too far, especially when she was still nearby. He was such a well-behaved dog, always staying close to her. She could no longer stay calm and began running around the house, looking in areas where she thought Max might be hiding. She called his name, but all she heard was the sound of the wind and the rustling of falling leaves. Sarah stopped, her heart began to race. A vague sense of fear rose up, and she realized that Max had disappeared. A sense of unease took over her. She ran outside to the garden behind the house, where Max often played. She looked around every tree, every bush. Max liked to crawl into the thick bushes and rest there when it was hot, but today there was no sign of him. Sarah felt as though a darkness was enveloping her. She couldn't understand why Max had left the house, and she didn't know what to do to find him. She stood quietly in the garden, feeling empty. The puppy she had loved so much had now vanished without a trace. She quickly ran inside, grabbed her phone, and called her family. They hurried over to help her search for Max. They went outside and searched the entire neighborhood, asking the neighbors, but no one had seen Max. The whole family tried to stay calm, but no one could deny the sense of worry and fear that was overwhelming them. Sarah couldn't sit still. She continued to go outside and search everywhere, hoping that Max had just gotten lost for a moment and would return. She walked down streets into narrow alleys, calling Max's name non-stop, but there was no trace of him. She felt as though she was searching in vain, and everything seemed to be growing more unclear. That evening, as night fell, Sarah couldn't sleep. She thought about Max, wondering where he was, if he was safe. She couldn't stop thinking about the joyful times when she and Max were together. Now all she could do was hope and pray that Max would come back. When Max left home, the puppy began his long and unfamiliar journey. The streets around him no longer felt as familiar as the walks he had taken with Sarah before. Max felt a little anxious, but his instincts guided him, and he did not stop, continuing on. The city streets Max walked through were so different from what he knew. The puppy couldn't find his way back home. Max wandered through unfamiliar neighborhoods, ran past green fields and rows of trees he had never seen. Every time he encountered a new place, he would stop and sniff around, curious about everything. But no matter what, he always felt that something was missing inside him. Thus, Max continued walking, not knowing where he was. Sometimes he would encounter some other animals, like squirrels or birds flying by, and feel a little excited. But the farther he went, the more he felt the loneliness. He was no longer being hugged and comforted like when he was at home with Sarah. As night fell, Max found a small corner to rest. The first few nights were the hardest for him. He wasn't used to having to find a place to sleep on his own without Sarah beside him to comfort him. On some cold nights, Max could only curl up, lying in a hidden corner, trying to sleep through his exhaustion. In the following days, Max kept walking, his tired legs, but his heart still unwilling to give up hope of finding his way back. He didn't understand why he had left, only knowing that something very important was missing from his life. He missed Sarah, he missed their morning walks, and he missed the warm bed where she would let him lie next to her. During his days wandering, Max met many strangers. Some people stopped and waved at the puppy, but Max just looked at them and continued on his way. Despite their kindness, Max did not want to stay with anyone for long. He didn't feel comfortable without Sarah by his side, and everything around him was too unfamiliar. He just wanted to go home, where there were familiar meals and happy moments with his owner. In the following days, Max was no longer as joyful as when his journey had first started. Although his instincts still guided him to keep moving forward, the farther he went, the more tired Max became, and he missed home. Every time he passed familiar streets, he would stop for a moment, hoping to find Sarah. But nothing changed. He didn't know that Sarah was still searching for him every day, putting up flyers, asking around, and never losing hope of finding Max. In the first few days of wandering, Max felt excited to explore new places. However, this joy quickly faded as he had to face the challenges and hardships that life outside brought. At first, Max was not used to having to find food on his own. He didn't have anyone to take care of him like at home, and there were no full, delicious meals. Max had to search for food from leftover scraps or rely on people passing by who gave him some bread or meat. There were times when he smelled delicious food from nearby shops, but when he got close, there were only crumbs left behind that no one needed anymore. Besides finding food, Max also had to face other challenges like the changing weather. The first few nights when the weather started to get cold, Max felt very uncomfortable. He wasn't used to the chill and could only find a hidden corner to sleep. The dark and cold nights made Max curl up under a big tree to avoid the wind. The howling wind and the rustling of leaves made him feel very lonely. During those nights, Max could not sleep well. His eyes stayed wide open, full of worry. He missed Sarah, he missed the warmth of home, and he felt helpless facing these things alone. One time, when Max passed through a large garden, he got stuck in a thick bush. He tried to free himself, but he could not. Just then, a heavy rain began to pour down. Max got soaked and felt very tired. He couldn't do anything except hide under the bush and wait for the rain to stop. The cold drops of water fell down, making him feel even more pitiful. Max felt like he didn't have the strength to continue. But not long after, the rain stopped and he resumed his journey. These challenges seemed to never end. Each day, Max had to face a new difficulty, from finding food to avoiding the rain. The heavy rains left Max drenched. The cold nights made him unable to sleep peacefully, and the times when he did not know where to go made Max feel lost. But despite all that, he did not give up. Even though he was exhausted and drained, Max kept moving forward, hoping to find a safe place, a place where Sarah was waiting. The farther Max went from home, the more he felt like a stranger. The puppy no longer felt the warmth nor the comforting pats he was used to. He was all alone in a vast and challenging world. But no matter what, Max did not give up. Deep down, he still held a small hope that one day he would find his way back home. One day, as Max was wandering the quiet streets, he met a stranger. This man was an elderly gentleman who lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city. His name was Mr. Henry, a kind-hearted old man who loved animals. As Max passed by Mr. Henry's gate, the puppy stopped, his tired and exhausted eyes looking inside. Mr. Henry saw Max from the window and immediately felt compassion. He had once owned a dog when he was younger, but that dog had passed away. Seeing that Max seemed to have traveled a long way and was weary, Mr. Henry decided to go outside to check. Mr. Henry walked over to Max, gently reaching out and saying, "Hey, little one, what are you doing here all alone?" Max was initially a little scared, but then he realized the old man had no intention of harming him. Slowly, the puppy approached and nudged his head against Mr. Henry's legs as if seeking comfort. Mr. Henry smiled kindly and gently patted Max's head. "What a sweet dog," he said. "You seem to be lost, do not you?" Max couldn't answer, but his eyes spoke volumes. He felt tired, hungry, and longed for some care. Without hesitation, Mr. Henry led Max into his house. The old man gave Max some water and offered him some food he had prepared. Max ate quickly, feeling the warmth and love that he had been missing for so long. Mr. Henry took Max inside and gave him a small bed to rest on. The old man gently petted Max and spoke to him as though the dog were an old friend. "Even though you are not my dog, I will take care of you like a member of my family. You will find your owner, and I will help you get there." Max felt as if he had found a close friend. Although he wasn't Sarah, Mr. Henry's gentleness and affection made the puppy feel safe and loved. For a brief moment, Max felt like he was no longer alone. However, Max still thought of Sarah, and even though he was well cared for here, he knew he could not stay forever. A part of Max's heart always longed to find his way back home, where Sarah was waiting. But at that moment, Max understood that he needed to rest and regain his strength, and Mr. Henry had given him the comfort he needed. In the following days, Mr. Henry took care of Max, giving him delicious food and comforting him whenever he felt uneasy. The old man even made a new collar for Max so that he would not get lost again. Max felt happier, but deep down, he always missed Sarah and never stopped hoping that one day he would be reunited with her. After being cared for by Mr. Henry, Max began to feel stronger and more joyful. However, every time he looked out the window, the puppy would think of home. The feeling of safety and the love Max once had with Sarah was always present in his heart. Although Mr. Henry was kind and treated Max like a friend, Max could never forget his owner. One day, when Mr. Henry took Max for a walk in the park near his house, Max saw a group of people playing with dogs. One of them called Max over, waved, and said, "This dog looks just like the one I saw on the missing dog flyer." Max did not fully understand what the person was saying, but he felt something very familiar. At that moment, Max suddenly realized that Sarah might be looking for him. Max's heart was filled with hope. He remembered the flyers Sarah had posted everywhere when he first went missing. He remembered the feeling of Sarah petting him and calling his name. His name, Max, had become a sweet memory for her. Max could never forget the days he spent with her, the times they played in the garden, the morning walks in the park. These images kept returning to his mind, making Max even more determined to find his way back home. Every time he passed a street, Max would stop and sniff the air, hoping to recognize a familiar scent. Whenever he passed houses, he hoped for a miracle, that Sarah would be there, waiting for him like before. But nothing changed. Max continued his journey, exhausted, but his hope never faded. Mr. Henry also noticed that Max seemed to be looking for something. He said to Max, "It seems like you are missing home. If you want to go back, I will help you. But you need to be prepared for another long journey." Max could not reply, but his eyes shone with gratitude and a strong determination. One beautiful morning, as Max and Mr. Henry sat in the garden, the puppy looked out into the distance, feeling as though a call was echoing from deep within his heart. Max realized that he could not stay with Mr. Henry forever. Although the old man had given Max so much love and care, Max's heart always longed for Sarah. And now Max made the decision to continue his journey to find his way home, where Sarah was waiting for him. Max thanked Mr. Henry with a gentle lick on his hand. The old man smiled, patted Max's head, and said, "Good luck, little one. Remember, wherever there is love, that is your home." Max continued his journey, full of hope and determination. He didn't know how many streets he would have to pass, how many gardens he would have to go through, but there was one thing that was clear in his heart. He had to return home. He wouldn't give up, for the love he had for Sarah still burned brightly in his little heart. Days went by, and Max continued his journey, crossing many streets and unfamiliar areas, but never losing hope. The exhaustion had made the puppy weak, but his perseverance and love for Sarah remained the driving force that kept him going. One day, as Max was walking down a familiar street, he suddenly caught a very familiar scent. It was Sarah's scent. Max's heart raced, and he began to run towards the smell, ignoring everything around him. Max ran through the streets, through gardens, and finally, when he saw a house he remembered very well, his heart nearly leapt out of his chest. It was Sarah's house. Max's eyes shone, and he ran quickly toward the door. Just then, Sarah was standing near the door, holding a sign with Max's name on it. Max stopped in front of Sarah, his eyes filled with tears and exhaustion. Sarah saw Max and could not believe her eyes. "Max, you are back?" Sarah cried, reaching out to embrace the puppy. Max gently jumped up and buried his head in her arms, as if unable to believe he had found her. The warmth of Sarah's embrace made Max feel like all the difficulties and challenges of his long journey had vanished. He no longer felt tired, no longer felt lonely, because now he was exactly where he belonged. Sarah stroked Max and said through her tears, "I have been searching for you everywhere, Max. I was so worried. Thank you for coming back to me." Max gently licked Sarah's hand, as if to say, "I missed you so much, and I've been so tired. But now all I need is you." They both sat on the porch, with Max resting his head on Sarah's lap, his eyes half closed in happiness. Finally, Max had returned home, where there was love, safety, and care, everything he had longed for during his days of wandering. Sarah and Max were reunited, and Max's journey ended with a touching and joyful conclusion. From that moment on, Max never had to worry about getting lost or facing loneliness again. Every day, he was showered with endless love from Sarah. They resumed their morning walks in the park, their evenings spent together. Max had found his family again, and the love Sarah had for her puppy would never fade. Thank you all for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the best stories. See you in the next one.